time for another episode of Crimes Notes. What we're going to do now is, instead of going through all those individual steps where we had to do distributive, commutative, associative, and all of that, we are going to try to minimize. So what we're going to do is follow those steps, but maybe skip some in between. And some of you are kind of already doing this. So we're still going to simplify first. Remember, that does mean to distribute, okay? First. So we're still distributing. Again, remember, this is just a fancy word for multiply, right? So if we need to, we can put that underneath here. That means multiply. And we do this to get rid of parentheses. Then, once we've distributed, we're just going to combine like terms. So again, to combine like terms, we use the commutative property. But we're kind of going to do the commutative and associative all together. Okay? So let's kind of just look at number 1. Okay? Number 1 says 5 and then minus 7, parentheses 2n plus 1. Remember, whatever number is directly in front of the parentheses is what we're going to distribute. So we're going to go ahead and distribute the negative 7 here and here. Remember, it has to go to everything inside the parentheses. So the first thing we're going to do is just bring this 5 straight down. So I bring down the 5, and now I'm going to distribute or multiply by the negative 7. So negative 7 times 2 would give me negative 14, and then I still have the n. And then negative 7 times, this is a plus, so positive 1 would be negative 7. So there's our first step. We did go ahead and distribute. Then the next part is to combine like terms. So again, this is where, if you have highlighters, you might want to pause the video and get those. But if we look, this has an n. But there are not any other terms in here that actually have an n. So it's by itself. And then this term goes with this term, because both of those do not have an n. So now, instead of reordering and doing everything, we're just going to try to combine like terms from here. So instead of having to write it separately, I could actually just say negative 14n, and I'm going to write that first because you usually write the variable first. And then it would be 5 minus 7. So I would literally put in my calculator 5 minus 7. Whenever you do that, you would get negative 2. Again, remember, what you entered in your calculator for this was 5 minus 7, which gave me the negative 2. Good. So number 2 is much the same. Remember, this is a negative 5, just like this was a negative 7. So we're going to bring down this 2n. And then I want you to multiply negative 5 times negative 6. And then negative 5 times negative 3n. That may be something you want to remind yourself. Okay, these negatives are super important. So a negative and a negative will make a positive. Okay, so I'm going to let you complete that one on your own. And then I'm going to go ahead and jump down to number 3. Number 3 is something we've talked about before. It's still the same idea. This is not directly in front of the parentheses, so I just bring it down. So here's the 11. But then I have this negative sign that is right in front of the parentheses, and we talked about how there's an imaginary 1 that sits right here in front of that. So we would distribute negative 1 times 5x and a negative 1 times a positive 4. So I would put my calculator, negative 1 times 5, and that would give me minus 5x. And then I would do negative 1 times 4, and that would give me negative 4. So I would put minus 4. And now this one looks much like number 1 that we did. This is minus 5x which would be kind of by itself. And then I have this 11 and this minus 4. So we'd go ahead and bring down that negative 5x. And then in our calculator, just like we set up here, we would do 11 minus 4, and that would come up as plus 7. And I would show you what these look like when you put them in the calculator, except for I forgot to bring a calculator home. So hopefully you guys are comfortable with using your calculator. All right, so now let's look at number 4. Number 4 goes back to where we have multiple sets of parentheses, so we do have to distribute first. So I'm still going to go through and highlight all these negatives first so that I remember these are all negative numbers. So now I'm distributing a negative 5. So negative 5 times 3y would be negative 15y. Then I would do negative 5 times negative 7. This is what you've got to be careful of. So a negative times a negative would give me a positive 35. Good. The second part, this is just a negative sign, so remember here's that imaginary 1. So I'm going to distribute this negative 1 into this set of parentheses. So negative 1 times 6 would be minus 6, or negative 6. And then negative 1 times positive 4 would give me negative 4y. So now we are going to go ahead and highlight like we did before. So here's minus 15y, and then over here there's a minus 4y. And then in the middle I have my two terms that don't have numbers. Now again, if you still need to and it's helpful to you, you can still write these out. So if you're wanting to do this step where we say negative 15y goes in here with the minus 4y, and then over here we do the 35 minus 6, this is fine. You can still do this step if you want to and if it makes it easier, but you can also skip this. So skip if you want to, which is what I've been doing. Okay, but if you want to still write that out, that is still perfectly fine. So now if I do this set, negative 15 minus 4y, I get the negative 19y. Okay, and then there's always that plus that goes in between here. Okay, and then I have 35 minus 6, which would be positive 29. So that would be my answer. Again, remember, I can't put this with this because they're not like terms. This has a y variable and this does not. Okay? All right, so let me kind of help you set up this last one, and then I want you guys to try this one on your own. Okay? So we're going to distribute a 3, so it would go here and here. Okay? And then this set of parentheses has a negative 2, so it would go here and here. But then I have this minus 5 out here. Well, that's going to be exactly the same as what we had up here, except for instead of it being a number in the front, it's a number at the end. So we would just go ahead and bring down this minus 5. So when we get done distributing through all of this, we're going to have that minus 5 at the end before we end up combining like terms. So I want you guys to try that one on your own. Alright, so now let's go down to the bottom where it says simplify and then evaluate. So we're still going to do exactly what we were doing before. We're going to combine our like terms first, and then after we've combined our like terms, then we're going to plug in. So this is exactly like what we were doing on the back side of your 1-3 notes, where we simplified it first and then evaluated. So if you notice on these problems, there's not any parentheses. So we don't have to distribute or do any of that. We're just going to combine like terms. So if I look at Oh, let's see. We've been doing quite a bit of this. Maybe I will do number 6. So if I look at number 6, let's do the x's first. I wonder if y'all can hear my kid screaming yet again. This is minus x. So those two go together. Then the next thing we have is minus y, going with this minus y. And then lastly, had to dig out a third color. We've got to do minus z and plus z. So again, if you want to, you can go ahead and separate these into groups. So if I did the pink, it would be 7x minus x. And then if I do and again, it's always a plus. And then if I do the y's, minus y minus y. And then always a plus. And then we could do our blues, minus z plus z. But again, feel free to skip this step. So you can skip if you want. Okay, so now 7x minus x, or you could do the pinks, 7x minus x would give you 6x. Then we have minus y minus y. Remember, there are invisible ones that are sitting in front of these. So if I put in the calculator -1 minus 1, then I should get minus 2y. And then over here, the same thing. Remember, there's those imaginaries, 1, so here's a 1, and here's a 1. And if I were to put in the calculator, -1 plus 1, that's where I get 0z. So the option is you can put plus 0z here, but it's not necessary. You're not required to have that. So then we need to evaluate. Gracious. So now we're ready to go ahead and plug in. X equals 2, y equals -4, and z equals 5. So this is 6 times x, which is 2, minus 2 times y, which is -4. So then I could type that directly into my calculator and press enter, and it would tell me that this solution would be 20. So I've left you 2 boxes over here, or 2 lines. This first one is going to be for the simplify part, and the second part's going to be for the evaluate part. So this is going to be the 6x minus 2y, and this part's going to be for what you got once you evaluated. And the reason for that is that if you end up getting this wrong, this is going to come out wrong, so I want to check this first before we do this part. Okay. So I'll highlight number 7 for you, but I want you guys to do it on your own. So this is 5x. So if we scan through, here's an x. Then we would have a y. So here's plus 4y minus 3y. That's it. Okay. Again, notice that I'm highlighting the signs that are in front of the numbers. Okay. Then I have this minus 2xy and a plus 3xy, and I don't happen to have a 4th color, so I'm just going to kind of circle this so that you know it goes by itself. So if you're going to do it, you're going to have the pink part, the yellow part, the blue part, and then the z will be left by itself. Okay? And I want you guys to try that one on your own. Alright, so let's flip over on the back, and I'll do one more with you guys. So let's see. Oh, which one looks good and ugly? Let's just do number 9. It's in the middle. So if we look, remember our first step is always to distribute. So we want to distribute first. Again, remember the instructions are to simplify, then evaluate. So I'm going to start by distributing the -3. So -3 times 7 is -21. And then -3 times -x. There's those negative signs again. We've really got to watch all these minuses so that we don't forget about them. That way we end up with those negatives plus negatives making positives. Okay? So -3 times -x, or -1, would be positive 3x. Then this is a negative 1 that I'm distributing. So negative 1 times 3 would be minus 3. And then negative 1 times negative x, or again, remember there's an imaginary 1. So negative 1 times negative 1 would make positive 1x. And then don't lose this piece. Make sure you bring this down. So there's minus 5x. So now I'd be ready to look for my like terms. So here's plus 3x plus 1x and minus 5x. So I've got 3 pinks this time, which is fine. And then I have minus 21 and minus 3. So now this is the step you could skip, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. So I'm going to do the variables first. So 3x plus 1x minus 5x. And then we always put a plus, and then we put the next set, and the yellows are minus 21 minus 3. Again, this is the step you can skip if you want. Okay, because you could just go 3 plus 1 minus 5, stick it in the calculator and get the answer. So when I put those all together, 3 plus 1 is 4. 4 minus 5 is negative 1. So I get negative 1x. And then negative 21 minus 3 is negative 24. So this is the simplified part. Remember, this is what we're putting in that very first answer box. So this says negative 1x minus 24. Now we're ready to evaluate. So to evaluate, we're going to now put in the values that it gave me for x. Well, if I look in the directions, it says x equals 3. So now negative 1 times 3 and then minus 24. So if I type that in the calculator, I'm going to get negative 27. And then that would be what goes here. Again, this is the simplified part. This is the evaluate part. So now I think you're ready to try the rest on your own. Good luck, and if you need help, remember, I'm still in the room.